Peter B. Collins. News and comment. It's Friday, September 9th, 2016. Over this weekend, we honor the ignominious anniversary, 15 years since September 11th, 2001. And I am sorry to say at this juncture, the cover-up appears to be holding, despite the efforts of many people to unravel it. And yesterday, I got to attend the annual 9/11 Film Festival held at the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland, and a lot of great activists have been supporting this effort for years. Professor Graham McQueen came in from Canada, and he made an interesting presentation, a live talk to the group. There were a number of documentaries and films that were screened, and one that I got to see is called A Decade of Deception, a film summary of the 2011 Toronto hearings, and those were organized by Professor McQueen. He is one of 9 people who participated in a series of short interviews that I put together into one package that I'll be releasing later today. It's going to run over an hour, and it might take you some time, but it's in nice little packages, 10 minutes or less, and so you could listen to it over a period of time. And what I tried to do was gather an array of voices of people who all agree that there was a cover-up, but they have different issues, different angles, and some different views. For example, Professor McQueen connects the 9/11 attacks with the anthrax attacks and couples them into a kind of depiction of an effort to control our government, and to brush back in particular people like Senators Tom Daschle and Pat Leahy, who received anthrax packages in the mail after they resisted the demands of the Bush White House for the blank check for the use of military force and the incredibly sweeping Patriot Act. We also talk with Lori Van Auken, whose husband Kenneth was killed in the World Trade Center, and who is one of the so-called Jersey Girls who shamed the Bush administration into the 9/11 Commission report, which turned out to be a cover-up. And she is still pushing, along with Kyle Hentz, who introduced me to the Jersey Girls. Kyle also introduced me to the work of David Ray Griffin, and Professor Griffin declined to participate. He is busy working on a new book that will be out in a couple of months and promised me an interview. The book is called Bush and Cheney, How They Ruined America and the World. So he has not stopped his sharp criticism, more than 10 books now, that he has written about the 9/11 truth efforts. And he has done a great job of painstakingly researching issues and detailing his arguments, and is really, I think, the scribe and conscience of the 9/11 movement. We also talked with Richard Gage. He is an architect and the founder of 9/11 Architects and Engineers for Truth. And he is a brilliant guy who has really dedicated the last 10 years of his life to using science and physical evidence to show that the official story is bogus. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with architect Richard Gage.
Because the official story tells us that they came down by jet plane impacts and fires, but not true. You can clearly see the upper 15 stories in the case of the North Tower telescoping down on itself. It's destroyed in 4 seconds. There's nothing left to drive the rest of the building down to the ground, and then, according to the official story, it destroys itself. No, after that first 4 seconds, we hear massive explosions hurling 4 times structural steel sections laterally in every direction at 60 miles an hour, landing 600 feet all around about both towers. And there's no stack of floors found at either tower. We're talking about 100,000 tons of concrete pulverized to a fine powder in midair. This is obviously the work of high-energy explosives doing all of this massive pulverization. But in addition, we find molten iron in so many different forms, the evidence of incendiaries as well. Mm-hmm. High-tech thermite incendiaries found in the World Trade Center dust, ignored by NIST in their official reports, but found in these red-gray chips, which are obviously the work of a very high-tech defense contracting firm that makes this stuff. Also, pools of molten iron seen by the first responders flowing like lava in the basements of the Twin Towers.
The full conversation with architect Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, will be available in my special interview package that we'll be releasing to our subscribers later today at peterbcollins.com and all of our outlets. In addition to those I've already mentioned, we talked with FAA whistleblower Bogdan Jakovic, also Dick Atlee, retired from the University of Maryland, and a guy who believes that Israel's probably more of a player in the 9/11 plot than the Saudis were. And also we talked with Joe Carson, the Department of Energy whistleblower, who is trying to make Washington work for whistleblowers by challenging the poor work of the Office of Special Counsel, which is charged with protecting the interests of federal employees who do blow the whistle. And in our package, we also talk with Carol Brouillet and Ken Jenkins, who are Bay Area activists. They help put together the 9/11 Film Festival every year in Oakland, and I consider them kind of archivists, and we're going to talk in particular about some of the issues where research has changed people's views over the years. So that is my big package. It'll be available to you late on Friday, and I hope that when you find the time, you'll take the opportunity to listen to this range of people, all demanding a true investigation into the events that occurred 15 years ago. Well, Laurie Van Auken is working hard to champion passage of a bill that's called JASTA, and it did clear the House of Representatives today on a vote that sends it to the White House, where President Obama says he will veto it. And this measure, which is interesting, has never been debated on the House or Senate floors. And if they did, I don't know how much it would stray beyond the carefully colored lines, the limits of dialogue and debate about what actually happened on 9/11. But the White House does threaten a veto. Now, to be fair, Obama has threatened many vetoes over the almost 8 years now that he's been in office. And I believe there have only been 2. So we'll see if the threat is actually carried out. But here's an interesting comment from Republican Jack Goldsmith, who served at the Office of Special Counsel during the Bush administration. And he was a guy who pushed back on John Hughes' language that allowed torture. And while, he was a Bush guy, he did occasionally show independence and a spine. And he said that this bill is a politically cost-free way for Congress to send a signal of seeming seriousness about terrorism on the dawn of the 15th anniversary of 9/11. Congress itself could have investigated lingering questions about 9/11, but instead is delegating those tasks to the unelected judiciary. The costs of the law will be borne by courts, which are an awkward place to ascertain Saudi responsibility for 9/11, and especially the president, who will have to deal with the diplomatic fallout. Now, I understand those concerns, but on balance, I do support this bill as just another way to try to pry open the locked gates regarding the 9/11 official story. And this summer's finally, the long-awaited release of the so-called 28 pages that turned out to be 29 pages does provide threads for further investigation. And there is clear evidence of questionable activities by Saudi operatives in the United States, supporting the 2 alleged hijackers who were living in San Diego, and other notable situations, including those who gathered in Florida, who were described as part of the September 11th plot. So my bottom line is that I will pull on any string that might unravel the threads of the cover-up of the truth about 9/11. I don't know exactly where that will lead, but I know bullshit when I smell it, and we have been fed a huge load of BS regarding 9/11, and even the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission acknowledged that they were lied to, they were fed information derived from torture, and that they are queasy about the legacy of the work they did when they look back at it now at the 15-year mark. Here's a very interesting piece that came out today, and there's a couple, Russ and Pam Martins. Russ came out of the publishing field. Pam spent 21 years working on Wall Street, and they have a blog called Wall Street on Parade. And I've watched their work. They've done a great job. Particularly Pam Martins is very critical of the excesses of Wall Street. So I was surprised to see a Wall Streeter, a veteran of Wall Street, cite the work of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, focusing on Building 7, which, as you know, came down inexplicably at 5:20 in the afternoon in 10 seconds. It was very obviously demolished by explosives that were planted inside the building, and its destruction parallels the earlier collapse of the other two towers at the World Trade Center after they had been hit by airplanes. But I'm convinced, as you may glean, that airplanes didn't bring down the World Trade Center buildings. It simply is not technically possible. And it is that physical evidence that drives the passion of many of the researchers. Coming back to Pam Martins, she says, "This is the first time we've ever written about 9/11. We live in Garden City, Long Island. Our next-door neighbor was killed in the Trade Center. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald." And they go on to say that there was a Fed bailout that occurred on September 12th, 13th, 14th, and the following Monday on September 17th. And more than $100 billion was pumped into the financial system, we were told, because of a liquidity crisis. But Pam Martins does the research and notes that 6 months before 9/11, a business writer for the New York Times noted that the market was tumbling and that the NASDAQ had lost more than $4 trillion in market cap value in 1 year. Then there are the notes from the Federal Open Market Committee meeting on August 21st, just a couple of weeks before 9/11, where they say a spate of weak second-quarter earnings reports and sizable reductions in earnings projections for the remainder of the year have taken a toll on equity markets. So the economy may not have been in free fall, but it was in trouble. And Pam Martins writes, "The 9/11 tragedy gave the Fed the freedom to crank enormous sums of liquidity into Wall Street within just a few days. $50 billion on September 12th, another $2 to $10 billion borrowed from the Bank of Canada on the 13th, and then a $30 billion swap line from the Bank of England that was approved on September 14th, and then they opened the discount rate window at the Fed and gave away some money there with a very low interest rate." And then she cites commentary from Greenspan, who was the chairman, Alan Greenspan, of the Federal Reserve at that time. He, of course, is still married to Andrea Mitchell of NBC, and he instructed all the people on the conference call, I would stay away from commenting on what we did just now, and I would refrain from speculating about the American economy. He was telling the Fed governors on that call to keep it secret. And this is the first time I've learned of it, and I've done a lot of investigation into 9/11. And speaking of cover-ups, we have a gentleman who has come forward. I don't think we can call him a whistleblower, because Daniel Jones worked for the Senate Intelligence Committee and was chief investigator into the torture programs that occurred under Bush and Cheney. And he has gone public blasting the CIA and the White House for attempting to cover up the investigation that the Senate conducted. He was the leader of the team that turned 6.3 million pages of internal CIA documents into a scathing study concluding that torture was ineffective and that the CIA lied about it to two presidents, Congress and the U.S. public. Jones has now broken his silence, and we credit the Guardian newspaper, which is based in London, and it does great coverage in the United States, puts the corporate media here to shame on a regular basis. They've gotten him to talk. And he's expressed his dissatisfaction with what he called a lack of accountability for torture at the CIA, and that under the leadership of John Brennan, the CIA was abetted in trying to silence criticism by the president. People who played a significant role in this program who are in the report continue to play significant roles in sensitive programs at the agency, said Jones, a former FBI counterterrorism analyst. To me, it's a huge lost opportunity. Here's an administration that came in and did all the right things within a few days, shutting down the program. We were never given a fair airing. No one from the White House would be briefed by us. They were briefed by the CIA. And it's true. Obama stiff-armed this investigation. And while I am sharply critic of California Senator Dianne Feinstein on so many issues, in particular her work when she chaired the Intelligence Committee, her tenacious efforts to get this report completed and her largely failed efforts to get it published and to get even members of the administration to read it and act on it is something I give her credit for. So The Guardian is teasing us. In upcoming installments, Jones will talk about how he was afraid the CIA would destroy important evidence, how a decision that left the investigation of extrajudicial transfers of terror suspects into the hands of foreign intelligence services was practically lost to history. That would be the rendition of suspects to Syria and Egypt, where we knew they would be tortured. And I haven't been able to read the full report because only the executive summary, highly redacted and with phony names, has been released. One of Obama's most senior aides insisted that the Senate obscure a finding that some CIA interrogators who operated at black sites after 9/11 had been accused of domestic abuse and even sexual assault. So we found some predators to prey on the captives. And another item that we expect to hear more about, senators were prepared to suppress the report amid national security concerns until James Clapper, the proven perjurer who is still the director of national intelligence, provided the committee with the farce of an analysis predicting that its publication would lead to chaos. And Mark Udall, a former United States senator who did his best to try to call attention to this problem while he was in office, says the deeper, more endemic problem lies in a CIA assisted by a White House that continues to try to cover up the truth. I worry that an agency that is yet to acknowledge these mistakes could continue to make them under a new administration. And if you got Donald Trump there saying waterboarding's lightweight, come on. I want some near-death experiences. So Jones' other quote is, this is John Brennan's CIA, Obama's CIA. They're providing inaccurate information to the President of the United States in the present day. So that cover-up continues, like so many. And the sad truth is that cover-ups work far too often. Well, back to the Trump circus. After the Wednesday event where Trump on NBC was praising Vladimir Putin, yesterday he went on Larry King's latest show, which happens to be on the RT channel. RT stands for Russia Today. Now, that network is owned by Russia, and I understand that people have different perspectives on what that means. But my friend Tom Hartman and my former radio colleague Ed Schultz have shows on RT, and at least in the case of Hartman, I don't believe he's compromised by the owners of his network. And Larry King, well, he's always been a lightweight interviewer, and so does some Russian guy tell him what questions to ask, which suspenders to wear? I don't know. I have been to the studio where Tom Hartman produces his show, and nobody there spoke Russian or came in on the set during the commercial breaks and said, you can't do that. But the corporate media is joining with Democrats to slam Trump because he appeared on this communist network. And, of course, he made some of those same stupid comments about Putin. And as you know, I don't demonize Putin. I don't participate in the efforts to isolate Russia and make it seem like, Putin is the most dangerous man on the planet. At the same time, I recognize who he is and where he comes from. But Trump is over the top in this kind of love fest with Putin, And it appears to be making some of his colleagues very uncomfortable. And so I defend Trump's right to appear with Larry King on this program. I understand the optics of it. And yes, Abby Martin was either fired or left RT because they weren't allowing her to fully express herself about Russia and Ukraine. But this is a little over the top. And it's part of this whole Russia-bashing effort that appears to be central to the Democratic campaign this year. Meanwhile, in what is billed as a news analysis piece in Friday's New York Times, we learn that Russia is trying to elbow the United States out of the way as the honest broker of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, some of this may just be for show. I acknowledge that. But this piece in the Times offers some pretty strong opinion here. Let me read to you. Russia's newfound Middle East peace push, part of Putin's reinsertion of Moscow into the region in a profound way after years of retreat, seems to be about everything but finding peace in the Middle East. Instead, it is about Moscow's ambitions and competition with Washington, exemplified by its intervention in Syria. Now, I think that this is a pretty rich statement to make when this dalliance or process has just begun. And I welcome Russian efforts to broker peace. Putin appears to have gotten a little chummy with Netanyahu. I don't know if that does any good, but I, for one, believe that anybody, whether it's the United Nations, the Russians, China, anybody who can organize talks and try to end the stalemate between Israel and the Palestinians deserves support. And so certainly the regional intentions of Russia are fair game for comment and criticism. But I see this overarching effort to paint Russia as the bad guy in every case. And I'm not willing to buy into that. And the commentary piece from the Times goes on, Israel is determined to deflect what it considers more threatening interventions by the French or even the Americans. And the Palestinian leadership facing internal challenges, plummeting support, trying to shore up its standing at home. And I read in another story that the October elections in the Palestinian territories may be put on hold. We'll try to get more information on that. So, again, I don't know if this will gain any traction or produce any change. But the effort is welcome on my part. Oh, and here's a comment from Netanyahu. He released a video today accusing the Palestinian leadership of demanding a Palestinian state with, quote, no Jews, end quote, in it. There's a phrase for that, he said. It's called ethnic cleansing. Now, I think this is really a fascinating look at propaganda and projection, because Netanyahu is well aware that his own hawkish defense secretary, Avigdor Lieberman, is a guy who wants to purge all of the non-Jews from the state of Israel. And he's open about it. He is a promoter of apartheid. And he is a ranking member of the cabinet of Benjamin Netanyahu. And it's really cheeky. It is the height of chutzpah for Netanyahu to talk about ethnic cleansing. Meanwhile, Israel has, for unknown reasons, gone public to let everybody know that they're spending almost $500 million to build a 45-mile barrier. Now, this is a companion to the separation wall that separates Gaza from Israeli territory. And they're planning to build this underground barrier. It's like Donald Trump's wall underground. And they say it's going to go several hundred feet below the surface. And like Trump's wall, this is an exercise in futility. Because if Trump builds a 40-foot wall, people will come with 45-foot ladders. And if Israel builds a 300-foot barrier underground, the tunnels will go at 350 feet. And instead of trying to resolve the conflicts and the issues that cause Palestinians to dig tunnels, Israel prefers the tactics, well, that we unfortunately saw used against them in the past. And now they're using them on their opposition. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And there are a lot of great people all over the country. Del Leonard is a very generous guy from Maine who subscribes annually and sends me books and stuff. And Del, I just want to let you know I've got a nice surprise for you coming up next week. You'll hear it in the interview with Andrew Basovich that I'll be releasing on Monday. But I also want to thank Jason Spitzer, Cheryl Fleming, and Dick Atlee. Dick is a subscriber, also participated in our 9/11 roundtable that I'm going to be releasing later today. So thanks to each of you. I really appreciate your support. I want to invite those of you who don't subscribe to lend your support if you're financially able. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. You click menu, pull down, you click Become a Subscriber, takes you to the sign-up page. The bonus books are displayed for new annual subscribers with a mailing address in the continental U.S., and so far nobody has claimed the book about the SLA and Patty Hearst called Revolution's End by Brad Schreiber. I have a single copy to give away to the next person who takes out an annual subscription and offers me a choice, tells me that they want it. So thanks again for your support, and keep listening here at peterbcollins.com. Now available on YouTube. That's right. We distribute the free daily podcast every day on YouTube, and we're starting to see traffic build there. 15, 20, 30 people are using YouTube to access the podcast every day. And I know that's convenient for some of you who use Android phones or other devices and haven't been included in some of the distribution platforms that we've been using. Today, September 9, is the 45th anniversary of the Attica prison uprising in New York State. And across the country, we are expecting inmates to stage prison labor strikes and prison strikes in general to highlight their mistreatment and their being subjected to poisoned water. We've seen that at a number of institutions recently, solitary confinement and forced labor at almost slave wages in some states, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and Arkansas. You can work, but you can only work under certain circumstances to get credit for prison sentence time. You don't get any coin. And in some states, the rates are ridiculously low, like $1 or $2 an hour. The national average for prison labor is about $4 an hour. And this is an issue that we do need to come to terms with. But so far, we don't see a lot of movement in that direction. Also, at this time of year, prisons are often like ovens. And in California, we're not alone with, heat waves in the south, in the southwest, and, of course, in many parts of the country where summer gets beastly hot. Prisons generally are not air-conditioned. And that's why prisoners in California love to come to San Quentin and try to angle to get to the prison that's right down the road from me, because it's right on San Francisco Bay, and the cool breezes make it a tolerable place to spend the summer, given that there's no air conditioning. So these are important issues, and I hope that you will watch in your own location. And if prisoners are striking, raise your voice in support of their aspirations, and raise your voice to your elected leaders to get them to address the dismal conditions that we continue to lock people up in. Well, I happen to be a customer of Wells Fargo Bank, and you may know from the Music Man, there was that song about the Wells Fargo wagon. It's coming, it's coming. And Wells Fargo continues to use a stagecoach as its icon, as its marketing brand image. Well, if that's the case, a couple of wheels have come off the Wells Fargo wagon. And yesterday they announced that they have fired more than 5,000 employees. 5,300 is the number. And they're paying fines of $185 million after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, this is the agency set up under Dodd-Frank that the Republicans tried to block starting the office, filling the position of the leader of that office. They've done everything they can to thwart it. And here we learn that one of the nation's largest banks, it's too big to jail, too big to fail. They put so much pressure on their employees that these 5,300 people were found to have opened over 1.5 million bank accounts, and also applied for over 500,000 credit cards that customers didn't ask for. Why did they do it? Because they had oppressive sales quotas, and when they couldn't meet them, they cheated. And they set up phony accounts for real people and then transferred money from the real accounts to the phony accounts and siphoned off fees that fattened the bottom line of Wells Fargo Bank. Now, I don't support the inappropriate behavior by these 5,300 people, but I want a deeper investigation, and I want to see the memos from the executives who put pressure on these people that caused them to operate in this manner. And finally today, I just want to mention this is a table of statistics that's been bouncing around on the internet this week, and it helps us put things in perspective 15 years after 9/11, because so many people are wrapped up in fear. And television and the movies with shows like Homeland and 24, films like Zero Dark 30, have inculcated fear in Americans to the point where they think there's a terrorist lurking behind that mailbox or at the gas station down the street. And I'm going to start here in descending order. Based on statistics from 2014, this is an average over a 10-year period, annually, almost 12,000 people are killed by being shot by another American. 737 people die by falling out of bed. 264 die by being hit by a bus. Lawnmowers are responsible for the deaths of 69 Americans every year. Lightning strikes and takes the lives of 31 Americans annually. Armed toddlers, on average, kill 21 people each year. All Islamic jihadist terrorists, including U.S. citizens, the average fatality rate is 9 per year. From mostly white American far right-wing terrorists, the average fatality rate is 5 per year. And from those described as Islamic jihadist immigrants, that would be the couple in San Bernardino, the average number of people killed per year is 2. So don't be afraid, my friends. But be careful when you get out of bed. Thanks for listening to my Rants and Raves, my free news and comment podcast, now available on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.